One of Opti's specialties, and this is why he's been promoted so rapidly, is that he is a quick learner. And, when you go on the battlefild and you experience things, you adapt. You come up with new concepts, new tactics, new operational theories. And they pulled Opti out of the battlefield and sent him to the General Staff Academy, not only to learn from others, but to teach people, too, about his experience. And you see these generals, these officers come from the battlefield, and they share their experiences, and then that gets turned around into interim doctrine that's published down, and the Russian army is always learning, always getting better. And right now from Kursk, there's a whole new set of lessons learned that are being fed back into the Russian, military education system to educate everybody from the private to the general about what the hell's going on with this new technology. But this is...
Welcome to our channel. Today we will immediately begin with an in-depth analysis of the significant losses that Ukrainian forces have suffered in the Sumy region. As Mr. Scott Ritter has pointed out in his recent analysis, the strategic missteps by Ukraine are becoming increasingly apparent. The latest reports are stark. Minus 270 Ukrainian soldiers have been eliminated, 10 UAVs have been shot down, 1 artillery piece has been obliterated, 2 tanks have been destroyed, and 14 heavily armored combat vehicles have been wiped out. These losses are not mere statistics, they represent the crumbling backbone of Ukraine's armored divisions. Each destroyed vehicle is a blow to Ukraine's ability to mount any effective counteroffensive in this critical region. But these numbers only tell part of the story. When we consider the cumulative losses over the past week, the picture becomes even grimmer for Ukraine. Nearly 2,200 soldiers have been lost yesterday, and while there's been a minor decrease of 50 from the previous day's toll, the overall trend is one of relentless attrition. Ukrainian forces in Sumy are being systematically dismantled, their operational capacity eroded with each passing day. This isn't just about numbers, it's about the strategic implications. Sumy, once a fortified region for Ukraine, is now on the verge of becoming a significant weak point. The relentless pressure from Russian forces is beginning to show cracks in Ukraine's defense, and these losses are only the beginning of what could be a catastrophic collapse in this sector. As Sumy continues to bear the brunt of the conflict, the situation in Kharkiv reveals a rapidly escalating crisis. Turning now to Kharkiv, the situation here has escalated with alarming speed. As noted by Mr. Inspector, the strategic importance of Kharkiv cannot be overstated. The casualty count has surged to 165, a threefold increase from just 2 days ago. This surge isn't merely a statistical anomaly, it reflects the renewed ferocity of the Russian offensive in this region. Ukrainian forces already stretched thin are now facing the full might of Russia's military capabilities. In Kupiansk-Lyman, the story is much the same. With 475 Ukrainian casualties reported, the region remains a critical flashpoint. Despite a slight dip in the intensity of fighting compared to previous weeks, Ukrainian forces are enduring heavy losses, and their ability to hold these positions is becoming increasingly tenuous. The strategic value of these areas cannot be overstated. Kharkiv and Kupiansk-Lyman are key to Ukraine's northern defense lines, and the loss of these regions would open the floodgates for further Russian advances. The Ukrainian forces are not just losing soldiers, they are losing ground, morale, and the very infrastructure that supports their war effort. The situation is becoming increasingly unsustainable for Ukraine, and the question now is not if, but when these defenses will collapse under the relentless Russian pressure. As Kharkiv and Kupiansk-Lyman continue to heat up, the devastation in Bakhmut demands our immediate focus. Bakhmut has long been a focal point of intense fighting, but yesterday's events have pushed the situation to new extremes. Inspector Scott Ritter recently emphasized the strategic consequences of the ongoing battle in Bakhmut, noting that the relentless Russian advance has turned the city into a crucible of destruction for Ukrainian forces. With casualties reaching nearly 700, this figure represents one of the bloodiest days in the conflict to date. The sheer scale of destruction in Bakhmut is staggering, and it's clear that Ukrainian forces are being ground down to the point of no return. The strategic importance of Bakhmut cannot be overstated. Situated at a crucial junction, this city has become a symbol of Ukrainian resistance, but also of its limits. The relentless Russian advance has turned Bakhmut into a meat grinder where Ukrainian forces are thrown into the fray with little hope of relief. The losses here are not just in numbers, but in the very spirit of the Ukrainian military effort. Meanwhile, the situation in Avdiivka continues to deteriorate. Losses have climbed to 395, marking a significant 15% increase from the usual toll. This escalation signals a broader trend. Across the front lines, Ukrainian forces are increasingly unable to hold their positions. In Ugledar and Zaporizhzhia, while the casualty figures have remained steady, the overall impact on Ukrainian operational capabilities is profound. Each loss in these regions chips away at Ukraine's ability to mount any form of coherent defense or counterattack. In Bakhmut, the situation has reached a critical juncture. The question is no longer whether Ukrainian forces can hold the city, but how long they can survive the relentless onslaught. The psychological impact of such heavy losses cannot be ignored. As Ukrainian troops are worn down, their will to fight is eroded, and the likelihood of a complete Russian takeover becomes increasingly certain. As Bakhmut reaches a breaking point, the unfolding events in New York, Ukraine, a critical battleground, deserve our close attention. Let's now focus on the strategically critical city of New York in the Avdiivka region. Inspector Scott Ritter has highlighted the significance of recent developments here, emphasizing that the fall of New York is not just another tactical victory for Russian forces, it's a strategic game changer. Ukrainian defenses have all but collapsed, and over 90% of the city, including its largest factory, is now under Russian control. This rapid advance has not only caught Ukrainian forces off guard, but has also forced them into a hasty retreat from this vital industrial hub. The significance of New York's fall cannot be understated. This isn't just another city, it's a critical node in Ukraine's defense network. The loss of New York represents a severe blow to Ukrainian strategic capabilities. The factory complex alone was a key logistics hub, providing essential support to Ukrainian forces across the region. With it now in Russian hands, the entire dynamic of the conflict in this area has shifted decisively in Russia's favor. As we analyze the broader implications of this victory, it becomes clear that the Ukrainian forces are not just losing ground, they are losing the very infrastructure that supports their war effort. The ability to produce, repair, and maintain military equipment in this region has been severely compromised. This victory for Russian forces is not just tactical but strategic, as it undermines Ukraine's ability to sustain its military operations in the long term. The collapse of Ukrainian defenses in New York signals a broader trend across the front lines. As Russian forces continue to advance, Ukrainian positions are becoming increasingly untenable. The likelihood of Ukrainian forces retaking New York is now virtually non-existent. The strategic victory for Russia here is clear and undeniable. With New York now firmly under Russian control, the situation in Toretsk becomes even more critical as the battle for dominance intensifies. Over in Toretsk, the battle is focused on the critical Pivnishny and Druzhba sectors. Ukrainian forces are desperately clinging to vital high-rise fortifications that control the city's main entrance. However, Russian forces are methodically tightening their grip, and the outcome seems inevitable. As Inspector Scott Ritter has observed, the fall of Toretsk would represent a significant shift in the conflict, opening up new opportunities for Russian advances deeper into Ukrainian-held territory. These high-rise positions are not just strategically important, they are the last line of defense for Ukrainian forces in Toretsk. For 3 days, these positions have been under relentless siege. The fortifications, which once served as formidable barriers against Russian advances, are now crumbling. The question is no longer if these defenses will fall, but when. Should Russian forces secure these positions, it will spell disaster for the Ukrainian defenders. The ability to hold or lose these positions will determine the fate of Toretsk. The strategic value of Toretsk lies not just in its location, but in its role as a gateway to further advances. If Toretsk falls, the road will be open for Russian forces to push deeper into Ukrainian-held territory, further weakening Ukraine's defensive lines. The broader implications of this battle are clear. Toretsk is a linchpin in Ukraine's defense network. The fall of Toretsk would represent a significant setback for Ukrainian forces, opening up new avenues for Russian advances and further destabilizing Ukrainian positions across the region. The ongoing battle here is not just a fight for territory, it's a fight for the future of Ukraine's resistance in this region. As the battle for Toretsk rages on, we must now reflect on the broader consequences of these developments across the entire Ukrainian conflict zone. As we take stock of the situation across Ukraine, the toll on Ukrainian forces is becoming increasingly unsustainable. As Inspector Scott Ritter recently remarked, the cumulative losses suffered by Ukraine are not just a series of isolated incidents, but a symptom of a larger strategic collapse. In just the past 24 hours, Ukrainian forces have lost 27 heavily armored vehicles, 4 tanks, 32 artillery pieces, 7 self-propelled guns, 39 specialized combat vehicles, and 147 UAVs, minus 119 of which were destroyed attempting to strike Russian territory. These losses are not merely numerical, they represent the disintegration of Ukraine's warfighting capabilities. The destruction of key assets such as the TPQ-36 radar antenna and the electronic warfare system further cripples Ukraine's ability to coordinate and defend its positions. The obliteration of a fuel depot in Sumy and 9 ammunition depots across the front lines underscores the systematic dismantling of Ukraine's logistical and support infrastructure. Each of these losses brings Ukraine closer to a breaking point. The situation in Bakhmut has escalated to unprecedented levels of destruction, and with Sumy emerging as a new front line, Ukrainian forces are stretched thinner than ever. The ability to sustain any form of coherent defense or counterattack is rapidly diminishing. The coming days and weeks will be decisive, potentially marking a turning point in this conflict, a turning point that favors the strategic and tactical superiority of Russian forces. The broader consequences of these developments cannot be overstated. As Ukrainian forces continue to endure heavy losses, the very foundation of their resistance is being eroded. The collapse of key defensive positions, the loss of critical infrastructure, and the diminishing morale among troops all point to a conflict that is increasingly tilting in favor of Russia. The question now is not just how Ukraine can survive this onslaught, but whether it can sustain any meaningful resistance in the face of overwhelming odds. Stay tuned as we continue to monitor these critical developments and bring you the latest updates from the front lines. In conclusion, as Inspector Scott Ritter has consistently pointed out, the strategic collapse of Ukrainian defenses across multiple fronts is becoming increasingly evident. From Sumy to Bakhmut, and now to Troitsk, the tide of war is turning decisively in Russia's favor. The relentless pressure, the strategic victories, and the mounting losses for Ukraine all point to a conflict that is rapidly approaching a critical juncture. The question that remains is how long Ukraine can hold out against the overwhelming force that it now faces. We will continue to bring you updates as this situation evolves.